If you're looking to play a Witcher in Baldur's Gate, have I got the build for you. Hail, adventurer. The easy thing to do would just be to build 12 levels of Ranger. Geralt is a monster hunter, there's a hunter subclass, and a pure hunter ranger would give us Hunter's Mark and Whirlwind Attack. And if you've played The Witcher 3, you're probably familiar with just how powerful Whirl is. But that's kind of the easy and boring way to go about it. We'd be missing most of Geralt's signs, and Rangers don't even get the great weapon fighting style. Instead, I'm gonna mash together 3 different classes. I think a proper School of the Wolf Witcher needs a few different things. First of all, you need to be an excellent martial combatant with the two-handed sword. Then we need some way to get all 5 of Geralt's signs, even if we're not particularly great at casting them. We need some way to show that we're an excellent tracker and hunter, some showcase of mutant genes, which I think you can do mostly through illithid powers, and Witchers are masters of potions and different weapon coatings. So we need an easy way to get a lot of them, and you want to get used to using them with most of your bonus actions. Now, despite Geralt's exposure to mutagenics, he is a human, so that's the race I want to start with. This will be a great character for a Tav or even the Dark Urge. But if you wanted to slot it onto a companion, I think it fits Will very well. He's already got Monster Hunter built into his backstory. But at its core, this build is really about being a great 2-weapon martial, so I think it can also fit Lae'zel and Karlach fairly well. But like I said, as a Tav, I'm going to start as a human. You can pick another race if you like. Wood Elf for the extra movement speed is great, Duragar for enlarge and invisibility, Githyanki for Misty Step and Astral Knowledge, Half-Orcs make great melee fighters, and Halfling Luck is absolutely the best racial feature. But I'm going to stick with human to match up with Geralt. This will give us Civil and Militia, which isn't really going to do anything for us. We're going to get those proficiencies from our class, but we'll also get an extra skill, which we will make pretty good use of. It took me a while to figure out exactly what class to start with. When I was theory crafting for this build, I was really thinking about what it means to be a School of the Wolf Witcher. There are 2 wolf-themed subclasses, the first being the Ranger's Beastmaster subclass that lets you actually summon a wolf, but aside from his horse Roach, Geralt is more of a lone wolf himself, so I don't think something built around summoning a companion makes a lot of sense for him. You can also pick a wolf aspect for the Wild Heart Barbarian subclass. The problem with Barbarian though is if we're raging, we can't cast spells, so we won't be able to make use of signs. So I ended up just landing on Fighter. We're going to start this build by getting that martial prowess, and then in our higher levels we'll start branching out into some more magical based abilities. This will also give us Constitution saving throw proficiency, which I think is pretty thematic for a Witcher. They've got a lot of durability after going through the mutagenic process. We get a little heal from Second Wind at level 1, and we get to pick a fighting style. Geralt is always wielding swords with 1 or 2 hands, so I think great weapon fighting makes the most sense. This will reroll 1 and 2s on damage dice, increasing our average damage by just a little bit. Now for background, you can obviously pick whatever fits your roleplay, but I think the 2 that make the most sense for a Witcher are either Folk Hero. This will give you the survival skill, which I think is pretty important for any hunter type, but I think even more appropriate might be Outlander. This gives us 2 important skills with athletics and survival, and I think this makes sense for a Witcher living off the land and kind of avoiding people when possible. Now we can look at abilities and skills. I want to go with something pretty well-rounded for Geralt. We're definitely going to keep the 17 strength. I'm going to take 1 point out of Constitution here to put it into Dexterity. This will make both of these a +2 bonus instead of just one of them. It'll be nice to have a small increase to our initiative and get the maximum bonus out of medium armors if you want to wear them. Although I think in our case we'll probably stick to heavy armor. Then this spread for our mental stats is pretty good, I think, except that most of our signs are going to come from Wizard, which uses intelligence instead of wisdom. So I do think we're going to have to swap these to 12 and 10 like that. I do think that Geralt is both intelligent and wise, so I'd love to get these stats a little bit higher, but we kind of need the rest of these, so we just have to work with what we've got. And I think some people would think that Geralt would have a high charisma because he seems to be good at getting the ladies, but he's kind of the silent stoic type and a bit gruff and rough around the edges. So I think a low charisma score actually suits him. Then we can swap around our abilities here. We're going to get 1 from being a human and 2 from being a fighter. For our human stat, I actually want to pick up medicine. This is going to be really important a little bit later down the line. Then we already have survival and athletics from our background, so I'll probably pick up insight and perception. This will make us better at reading people and seeing things in the environment. Again, kind of why I would like to have our wisdom score a little bit higher if we could have it, but I don't want our intelligence-based spells to be totally useless. You could also make an argument for trying to fit intimidation in if you want some sort of charisma stat. I'd probably swap insight out for intimidation if you want that. But with those set, we can go to level 2. So at level 2, we want to keep taking fighter levels. A really nice breakpoint for fighters is level 6. This will grab us both extra attack and a second feat a lot earlier than other classes would normally get get it. And for this build in particular, it's going to let us still get 3 feats, despite the fact that we're multi-classing into 3 different classes. And Fighter is just a solid class all around at basically every point in the game, so you don't have to worry about being too weak early in a Tactician or Honor Mode run, or falling off later. And at level 2 Fighter, we get one of the strongest actions in the game, Action Surge. Taking turns is good, and taking 2 turns at once is even better. So let's move through to level 3. We'll get to pick up our subclass here, and I think the choice that makes the most sense is Battlemaster. Geralt is an expert combatant, and using maneuvers will really show off that martial prowess. You could consider taking Eldritch Knight if you wanted to start getting signs a little bit early, but for this build I want to focus more on the weapon combat. So for our maneuvers, there are quite a few good choices. I want to start by taking Precision Attack. This is a great way to hit enemies with really high AC, and we're going to take Great Weapon Master on this build. And Precision Attack can really help offset the -5 to attack rolls from it. I also like to take Riposte. Since we can wear heavy armor, this build is going to have quite a bit of AC, and Riposte will really help us weaponize our reaction whenever characters miss attack rolls against us. And for our third choice, I think we want something that can help control the battlefield. There are a few different options for this. Tripping Attack is a great way to knock enemies prone and gain advantage on attacks for your whole party against the target. Disarming Attack is also really good, especially early. If you're up against some sort of boss that hits really hard with a weapon, disarming them can basically solve those encounters for you. But I'm kind of planning on building this character around a ranger ability we're going to pick up later. So I'm going to take Pushing Attack as a way to easily move characters close to one another. Then we can go to level 4 for our first feat. So like I said before, here I want to take Great Weapon Master. On average, even with this -5 to attack rolls, we'll end up dealing more damage with Great Weapon Master, and we also have Precision Attack to offset this -5 a little bit. But if you really hate missing, you can take this later and start with a +2 to strength here. But as long as you play with that deficit in mind and you can toggle this off when it doesn't make sense, like against high AC enemies, I think it's the right pick. So we'll move on to level 5. The nice thing about Fighter is that these levels are straight and simple. We just get extra attack here. And then we're already going on to level 6, where we get another feat. So here I think I do want to improve my strength. Obviously, if you improved your strength already, then you would take Great Weapon Master here. Now, if you took Ethel's Hair, you could get to 20 at this level. But let's be honest, Geralt would kill an evil hag, for sure. So if you have this uneven strength score here, you can actually take Athlete instead. This can let us put up our strength still, but also give us a nice bonus to our jumping distance and make it so that we use a lot less movement when we get up from prone. So that's what I'm going to take because it makes sense with the statistics I chose. But the main thing to keep in mind here is improving your strength ability modifier by 1 at this level. Then as we move on to level 7, we're done with our fighter levels. We want to multi-class into both wizard and ranger. And something to always keep in mind here is that the last new class you take is the one that determines the saving throws for scrolls you cast and some weapon actions. And since I have slightly higher intelligence, I want to make sure that the last class I take is an intelligence one. So I'm going to take 1 level of ranger here, since it's a wisdom-based class, and then take Wizard at our next level. So we'll get to pick our first favorite enemy. I think Keeper of the Veil makes sense here. Even the tooltip specifies that you specialize in hunting creatures from other planes of existence, which is right up a Witcher's alley. You probably won't often cast protection from evil and good, but I think the proficiency in Arcana can be useful. Then we get to pick Natural Explorer, and we're going to be focused on these Wasteland Wanderer damage resistances, and Geralt's mutagenics make him naturally resistant to poison damage, so I want to start with that one. Then we also get to pick 1 extra ability. We have a few different options here. I think either Investigation or Nature makes sense for Geralt. I think Nature kind of makes sense for the Outlander type, but either is fine. Then we're going to move on to level 8. And now that we have that 1 Ranger level, I'm going to multi-class again to start taking Wizard levels. I think it's high time we start getting some Witcher signs. I like to have at least 1 damaging cantrip, so I'm going to keep Firebolt. I think this does an okay Igni impression. We can also pick up Blade Ward as a way to imitate Quen, and then Friends is a perfect cantrip to use as Axii. Then we'll also get to pick a bunch of spells. I'm going to remove these. We get to pick 6 in total. We already have protection from good and evil from our ranger level. I think we want to take Burning Hands as a more powerful way to use Igni. Shield is another perfect way to imitate Quen. Thunderwave can push enemies in a similar way to Ard. We can take Charm Person as another method to use Axii. There aren't a lot of ways to implement Earden, but I think the Sleep spell does an alright job. And then we kind of have 1 flex spot left. I think we want all these movement-based spells, but we can actually pick them up as a ranger. So you could either take Magic Missile just as a solid damage spell to have, or maybe something with a little utility like Featherfall. And at the moment we can only actually prepare 2 of them. I definitely take Shield. And then the other will be based on kind of just what you want to use in a particular encounter, but I kind of like Burning Hands as a default choice. You can also always cast all these spells from scrolls. Then we can move on to level 9, where we're going to pick up 1 more level of Wizard. There's a particular subclass ability that I think fits perfectly with a Witcher. That's the Transmutation Wizard's Experimental Alchemy. This makes it so that whenever we brew a potion, we roll a DC 15 medicine check, and if we succeed on the check, we make 2 of those potions instead of 1. Now Geralt is going to be using a lot of potions, elixirs, weapon coatings, and and poisons, so getting twice as many is pretty solid. This is why we took medicine as a skill early on, although it would be nice to have a slightly higher wisdom to make better use of this. So if you want to build around this specifically, you can do that. You can also have allies cast things like guidance and enhance ability to make it a little bit easier. Then we also get to pick up 2 more spells. We're going to take Expeditious Retreat because of these movement ones. It's the only one we can't actually get as a ranger. And then I think Tasha's Hideous Laughter is a fun spell to take. That's another impression of Axie. We'll get to prepare 1 more spell. Maybe you want a utility spell, some extra movement, or maybe Tasha's. You kind of want to experiment and see what works best for you. Now at level 10, we're finished with wizard levels and fighter levels, and we can keep taking ranger levels. Ranger is a really thematic tracking and hunting class, so I didn't want to make a Witcher build with at least some levels in Ranger. We get our first Ranger spells here, and we're definitely going to take Hunter's Mark. Early in the game, we'll be able to use items to get some uses of this, but it's just a solid and thematic spell to have throughout the game. Then we're also going to pick up Longstrider. I think you always want Longstrider somewhere in your party, and this character can help free up a prepared spell slot from another caster that can make better use of the space. Then we also get a second fighting style. If you wanted to do some sort of hybrid archery thing, you could take the archery fighting style so that even with the low dexterity, you can still make the odd ranged attack, but I think the safe pick is just defense. This helps give us a really solid AC even without a shield. Then at level 11, we get our Ranger subclass. We get 1 more spell, and I'm going to take Enhanced Leap. This can be great to cast on yourself before a fight in an arena with a lot of levels. And then for our subclass, we're of course going to take Hunter Ranger. Gloomstalker is probably the stronger subclass, but I think Hunter really fits Geralt, and I actually really like one of these abilities. I think usually the go-to here is Colossus Slayer for just a little bit of extra damage every turn, but what I want to take is Horde Breaker. This gives us the Horde Breaker attack feature, and when you make a Horde Breaker attack, it marks all enemies close to the target of the attack with a condition that will let you make 1 additional free attack on one of those marked creatures. The implementation of this is a little bit convoluted, but basically if there are 2 enemies beside each other, once per turn you can attack both of them. This is why we took the pushing attack maneuver earlier. We want ways to set up this Horde Breaker attack. Then for our last level, we're going to finish off with Ranger levels for our final feat. I think you have a couple of choices here. The first would be to take Martial Adept for an extra superiority die and 2 more maneuvers, although you can also get this from taking a 7th level of Fighter. Either is fine. If you haven't maxed out your strength yet, you can do that now with an ability score improvement, or, and I think this is probably the best choice, you take Alert. We have a fairly low dexterity score, so this bonus to initiative will make sure we go first in combat, and until you get this feat, you can use some items to help boost it. But I definitely think those are our 3 best choices. Now I want to talk quickly about a couple of different multi-class options before we jump into equipment. Now, the main other class I'd really like to be able to fit into this build is Rogue, mostly for expertise on medicine to make better use of that alchemy feature from our wizard levels, but also going 3 levels into Thief for a second bonus action for drinking potions and coating weapons would fit really well with what this character is trying to do. But we can't put 3 levels of Thief Rogue into every build. 2 bonus actions is just so good. Then I also mentioned Wolf Barbarian earlier, and if you care less about using signs or spells, then you could do more of like a Ranger Barbarian build. Wolfheart Barbarian does seem fitting for a School of the Wolf Witcher. Then if you wanted to do a little bit more wizardry, you could drop either the fighter or ranger levels and go 6 levels into wizard. This would give you a lot better spell choice. And I think if you really wanted to make use of Yrden, the best spell for that would be Slow. I think you'd have to have at least a 4th level spell slot for Slow, and then you could just learn it from a scroll even if you're not that far into wizard levels. But even with this build, you can just get scrolls of Slow to cast them. I think there are actually a lot of different directions this kind of build could go. We're kind of dipping our toes in a bunch of different stuff. And even just thinking about it a little bit, I already have a couple of ideas for other Witcher schools. So if you'd like to see some other builds for those schools, let me know in the comments and I might cover a few more. Now let's talk equipment. Obviously, we're going to have an array of potions, poisons, elixirs, and weapon coatings. I think a big part of this build is using whatever fits best for the encounter you're in. You could even switch elixirs on the fly in combat. In terms of Act 1 gear, we're really just looking for the biggest bonuses to AC in our attacks that we can get. Grimm's Helmet is great for avoiding critical hits, gaining resistance to fire that we don't otherwise have, as well as some use of Hunter's Mark probably before we have Ranger levels. This character can also make great use of the Silver Pendant. It's possible you'll have guidance on one of your other companions, but this character wants to use a lot of skills, especially on those medicine checks for our potions, so you definitely want it somewhere, and this might be one way to get it. And basically our best armor, even going right up until Act 3, is the Adamantine Splint armor. If you have a high dexterity, there are some better medium armors in Act 2. This avoids critical hits again, reduces damage, and gives creatures a penalty to their attack rolls whenever they hit us with an attack. It's very easy for this character to be kind of the main tank in the party. And for our main hand weapon, we're basically just going to use whatever longsword or greatsword we can get that has the highest stats. The Susur greatsword is pretty easy to get in Act 1, but there are a whole bunch of different ones. You can kind of pick your poison. So long as it is a sword, that's just kind of the Witcher way. And we also have 2 two great options for a ranged weapon. Both Gandrel's Aspiration and the Hunting Shortbow grant us advantage on attacks against monstrosities, and I mean, we're a monster hunter, it just makes sense. I see Geralt as more of a crossbow user, but I also doubt that he'd do what he would have to get Gandrel's Aspiration, so I think the Hunting Shortbow is probably the choice you'll make, and like Grimshelm, this also lets us cast Hunter's Mark. Then two of our better ring choices are in Act 1. The first is the Caustic Band, which is just great on any character making a lot of weapon attacks. And eventually, thanks to our Hunter subclass feature, we should be able to make 3 attacks most turns when we're against multiple enemies, even 4 if we can make use of the Great Weapon Master bonus attack. And then the Ring of Protection gives us a nice little boost to our AC and saving throws since we won't have a shield. Now in Act 2, I would switch your headward to the Circlet of Hunting. This gives us a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls against creatures that are marked by Hunter's Mark, True Strike, Fairy Fire, or Guiding Bolt. And it's around this time we'll be picking up our first Ranger level, so it shouldn't be too hard to keep Hunter's Mark up most of the time, basically granting ourselves a weird version of Bless. And this will make it even easier to offset that -5 penalty from Great Weapon Master. We can also pick up the Derivation Cloak. This just heals us a little bit whenever we poison a foe, and with all of our concoctions, we'll definitely be poisoning enemies pretty often. We can also pick up the Amulet of the Harpers. This gives us advantage on Wisdom saving throws, which is the most targeted check, so it's really nice to have, plus an extra casting of the shield spell. Then you might also want to try out the Poisoner's Gloves. This makes it so that whenever we deal poison damage, the target needs to succeed on a Constitution saving throw or become poisoned. Again, we'll be using lots of poisons and applying poison damage. Then this will apply that poison condition without having to specifically use a poison that applies the poison condition. A little bit of semantic confusion there, but you get it. Then we can also get the Ring of Free action. This makes us immune to difficult terrain, the paralyzed condition, and the restrained condition. I think freedom of movement is a slightly undervalued ability. This is an easy way to get it, and this makes it so that our high damage tank never has any problems with mobility. Of course, we won't need it as much in Act 3 once we get the Boots of Persistence. This makes it so that we're always affected by freedom of movement and Longstrider. I think you still want to have this Longstrider spell to help your allies, but it's nice to not have to think about it for yourself. And with the boots, I think it's also fair to put on the Armor of Persistence. Again, reducing damage by 2 like the Adamantine Splint Mail, but it also gives us a permanent bonus of resistance and Blade Ward. So we're going to be great at making saving throws and become just incredibly tanky. Now, alternatively, you could use the Elven Chain. This would give Geralt a lighter armor look and give a bonus to initiative, but it would make us quite a bit less tanky. If you didn't take the alert feat and need some ways to boost your initiative, I think this is a good choice. Otherwise, the Armor of Persistence is certainly stronger. Then to make better use of our maneuvers, we can use the Gauntlets of the War Master. This gives creatures disadvantage on saving throws against our maneuvers and weapon actions. This is especially good if you took some extra maneuvers at level 12, but even if you didn't, making it really easy to push creatures or use the actions on your weapon is really good. And speaking of weapons, of course the strongest weapon basically in the game is Baldur's Giant Slayer. This applies our strength modifier twice instead of once to damage. It grants advantage on attacks against larger, bigger creatures, has a spicy +3 attack bonus, and gives us a giant form, basically casting Unlarge on ourselves to deal a little bit more damage. And if you feel like you don't really need the bonus from the Circlet of Hunting, you can swap your helmet to the Helm of Balduran. Immunity to critical hits, immunity to stun, +1 to armor class and saving throws, and healing every turn. A lot of stuff happens on this helmet. And you could also upgrade your amulet to the Fey Semblance Amulet. This basically just also gives us advantage on intelligence and charisma saving throws, but neither of those is quite as important as wisdom saving throws, so you have to decide if you want those extra saving throws or that extra casting of shield. Now, as always, I like to talk about party comp a little bit at the end of the video. This character is a heavy-hitting tank frontliner, so they want allies that can lock down enemies or push them together to make use of Horde Breaker, as well as cover some weaknesses and the skills they don't have. So the first thing they want is some support, either from a cleric or a wizard, a character that can buff them with things like Bless and Haste, as well as keep them topped up on health. Then one of the skills that we're really bad at is Sleight of Hand, so you probably want a Trap, Disarmor, and Lockpicker in your party, some sort of rogue, bard, or other ranger that's focused more on dexterity. Then finally, you want somebody else to help group enemies together for Horde Breaker activations, something either like a Barbarian to throw and push enemies around easily, or a Warlock to push enemies around with Repelling Blast and Telekinesis. Also anyone with the Black Hole Illithid power. So what do you think of this Witcher build? Do you think it would just be easier to go the full 12 levels into Hunter? Either way, I think a strength-based character that's really focused around using different types of potions is really interesting. And although I don't really think Ranger is always the strongest class, I think it's one that is really flavorful, and I'm always trying to build for somehow. If you're looking for more Baldur's Gate 3 builds, there's a link in the description to a playlist of all the builds I've done so far, and there's always more to come. I've also started live streaming an Origin Astarion Honor Mode run, so if you want to check that out or just hang out playing some Baldur's Gate, you can catch it Thursdays and Fridays from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or just watch it whenever you feel like. It's not leaving the channel. So until the next time, happy adventuring.